Welcome back. Well, prosecuting those responsible for perpetrating domestic violence plays a pivotal role in the clampdown on gender-based violence, femicide and child abuse. In March this year, you'll remember that President Cyril Ramaphosa opened the state-of-the-art Booysens Magistrate's Court in Johannesburg. It was aimed at creating access for people to register or report complaints such as maintenance claims and domestic violence, among many others. Now, the opening of the facility was hot on the heels of the first ever presidential summit on gender-based violence and femicide held in November 2018. It was the beginning of the implementation of the decisions agreed to in drawing up a roadmap. We are still observing activism for no violence against women and children. So let's reflect on the work of these specialized courts. Crispin Peary, the spokesperson for the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, joins me now live in studio. Crispin, thank you very much indeed for your time. Women and children in this country are under siege. So not my words, these are the president's words when he was addressing joint sitting in Parliament in September. Talk to us about these courts, these specialized courts, and how much of an impact has it made with regards to the fight against gender-based violence?
In addition to those words, the president also called upon men to really look at themselves in the mirror, because ultimately the problem lies with us men. If we look at all the social institutions that we have in our society that reinforce rape culture and patriarchal norms that ultimately make us think that we're entitled to women's bodies, leads us to the crisis that we have on gender-based violence. We think that the courts have been quite successful in the work that they've been conducting thus far. Members of the public would be aware that unfortunately the court is right at the end of the criminal justice system. And so the key lies in reporting these matters to ensure that they end up at court. And so linked to the court, especially the one in Booysens, we have the Baragwana Thuthuzela Care Center, which from the period of April this year to September has had 1,050 odd reports. And of those reports, we can safely say that a lot of them are on the court roll in the Booysens Magistrate's Court. And the importance of having a specialized, actually a sexual offences court, is that it has its own dedicated court roll. So you would not have a sexual offences matter queuing up with another matter in the court. You have a specialized court role to deal with those matters. So we think that that's quite an important step in ensuring that domestic violence cases and sexual offences cases receive special priority from the state to ensure that perpetrators are put behind bars as quickly as possible or removed from society as quickly as possible.
Well, you know, society is looking for action. This court in Booysens was opened in March. Do we know about the conviction rate so far?
We can confirm that the conviction rate of most of the sexual offences courts across the country currently is sitting at 74%. So this is from the period of April to September this year thus far. And across the country, the Thuthuzela Care Centres are around in the region of 55, and they account for in excess of 17,200 complaints that have been brought to these Thuthuzela Care Centres. And if we are seeing a conviction rate of 74%, we think that the wheels of justice are certainly moving towards the correct direction. And in addition, we can also then say that these courts thus far, at least in the period that I'm referring to, this financial year, which is not yet over, we've seen 113 life imprisonments, 334 sentences between 20 years to 25 years, and we're looking at 80 sentences which account for 10 years to 19-year sentences. So we're seeing very heavy sentences, high conviction rates coming from these courts. And we hope that the more people have faith in our Thuthuzela Care Centres, then we would see justice wheels turning. And I think here it's important for me to just quickly elucidate on how the Thuthuzela Care Centres work.
Please do.
What we have in our Thuthuzela Care Centres is, like for instance, the one in Baragwana, you'd imagine is right next to a hospital. So an individual who comes there to lay a complaint is immediately assessed by medical officers. And then you have a prosecutor on site to assess the evidence, and essentially the case is a prosecution-led case. Unlike when you go to the police, where an investigation would be done through the rape kit process, and it does perhaps take a bit longer. But through the Thuthuzela Care Centres, you have a prosecution-led case, which enables the wheels of justice to turn a bit quicker than in a normal case would.
And your assessment thus far with regards to how equipped these centres are you satisfied with that?
We are working with civil society in these Thuthuzela Care Centres to equip them even more. There's always room for improvement to ensure that at least rape kits are easily available, prosecutors are there, and also well-resourced.
So are we lacking in all those categories?
Not yet, but there's always room for improvement. You'd know that the NPA itself is sitting at a vacancy rate, or was sitting at a vacancy rate of 25% across the country. And that affects prosecution of sexual offences as well. So we have put aside 104 million rand as the Department of Justice to recalibrate the NPA to ensure that there are prosecutors who are available to hear matters of all kinds. But of course, in this case, matters of sexual offences are a priority.
The President did mention when he addressed Parliament in September that he was speaking about something called the Emergency Action Plan, which was going to be implemented within the 6 months from the time he spoke about it. And there were 5 principal areas that he spoke about, and one of it was to strengthen the criminal justice system. How has it been strengthened since the time he announced this?
So one of the measures to ensure that the criminal justice system gets strengthened is to limit what we call secondary victimization. So if you go to a police station, you need police officers to be adequately trained so that they can understand how they can solicit the information from you without victimizing you further. The second aspect was also building sexual offences courts, more sexual offences courts. Currently, we are sitting at 96. By the end of this financial year, we should be sitting at 103 or 106 sexual offences courts across the country. This will also ensure that at least the wheels of justice in that regard, as I've said, you have dedicated court roles dealing with sexual offences, then the wheels of justice would have to move forward at a rate which society can accept.
Because I'm looking at the numbers here. I mean, every single day, police receive over 100 cases of reported rape. That's staggering, you know. With regards to the backlog of these cases at our courts, so what's it sitting at?
There is a backlog that's in our courts, and one of the things that the President has also called for is the reopening of all cold cases, so cases that have been dropped in police stations, to ensure that these cases are given priority. But insofar as the backlog is concerned, we've been able to move these to the specialised courts, the sexual offences courts, and they are receiving attention.
In terms of the NPA and the cases that it deals with, what percentage would you say is dedicated to the gender-based violence and abuse?
Well, I mean, so from the Tutuzela care centres, the ones that we've been able to extract, like I've said, in this period we're sitting with 17,000 cases that have been reported at that, which is a significant amount. For 55 care centres across the country. From a percentage point of view, I would not be able to tell you what it is. But interestingly enough, what we are able to see is that these reported cases have increased in the region of 1,500. Last year, during this period, we had 15,000 cases being reported at the same centres. So we are now seeing that at least society do see the value in going to these Tutuzela care centres, and they are able to report these matters. So
we're talking about reported cases. We're not talking about those that are not reported, you know, of fear, of various issues. What I'm trying to get at is our justice system adequately equipped to deal with these flood of cases that are coming through?
We are equipped. We have to deal with the cases that come before us. But what we've also seen, interestingly enough, is that even of the reported cases, there are people who still withdraw these cases even when they are reported. And that's also a very concerning statistic that we need to look into, because it speaks to what you've just raised, fear that society will stigmatize people who lay complaints. And that's why, in addition to that, what we have done as the Department of Justice is we have then now started what we call the Under the Tree dialogues with men in particular. And the thinking of these Under the Tree dialogues with men is to re-socialize society, to say, look, ultimately, we cannot be blaming the victims for complaining about these offences. It is us men, or it's us society, who have created these individuals who conduct such actions, and we now need to be able to recalibrate society and re-socialize ourselves as men to ensure that we are not perpetrators, but we are brothers, we are eligible people in society. And we've seen that this is a worldwide problem, even in crucial institutions like churches. I mean, the Catholic Church has been quite pervasive in dealing with sexual offences against young men. And what we've also then learned from a correctional services point of view is that abused men abuse. And that's another aspect that we need to deal with from at least from a preventative point of view, to say, how do we stop the abuser from becoming an abuser? Then we think we'll be moving forward somewhat.
Obviously, we'll have majority of women going to these cases, these centers, as well as the courts. But are you finding that men are also going there as well?
The men, it's difficult for men to come forward, and that's why we've then also initiated these under the tree dialogues, because we're trying to solicit men to come forward to say, actually, I was abused, but at the same time we're trying to deal with the conduct, the rape culture in society that makes men oblivious to some extent, how complicit they are in their everyday conduct, in their everyday language, in the oppression of women.
Right. Let's talk about the sentences, harsher sentences. And we know that the president spoke about proposing to Parliament the change of, necessary legislative changes in order to put forward these harsher sentences for victims, or for perpetrators rather, of gender-based violence. Has that happened?
The sentences that we have currently are quite harsh. For instance, rape gets you a minimum of life. Which is the highest level. And what also the legislative amendments that would be put forward, at least by March 2020, is the making public, to some extent, the National Sexual Offences Register. And by public, I mean ensuring that everyone who has committed an offence against anyone is on that list. Currently, we only have people who have committed offence against minors and people who are mentally incapacitated. So we need to ensure that, and society has said this, that anyone who commits offence, a sexual offence, is on that list. Whether we then make that list public to general society is another debate that society will
Crispin,
have.
I just want to pause there just a bit. We've got some other developing stories happening in KwaZulu-Natal. I'll come back to you in a short while. I wanted to